Hello, and welcome to this pre-recorded event for GCSE Music, the current specification. Controlled Assessment Marking Training for Composing Unit 2. To help you get the most out of this session, you may want to have the following documents handy, as we will refer to them during the session. The specification containing all the relevant mark schemes. You will be guided to the correct pages at the appropriate points in the presentation. The audio files, which are the recordings of the candidates' compositions. This is available as a zip file and will take some time to download, so you should pause the video at the end of this slide to download and unzip the files. The scores for the candidates' performances. Now, pause the video and download the materials and unzip the audio files. The specification is divided into 3 units: performing, composing, and listening and appraising. The first 2 units are internally assessed and externally moderated. The third unit is examined in a written paper, which is sat sometime in May or June and is externally marked. Performing and composing are each worth 30% of the overall marks, and the written paper is worth 40% of the marks for the award. All work for performing and composing must be marked by the teacher examiner and sent to the moderator to arrive by 15th of May in the exam year. The deadline is always the 15th of May, so if this falls on the weekend, the work is expected to be with the moderator on the Friday before this. For Unit 2, candidates must present 2 pieces of work. They can be either 2 compositions, 2 arrangements, or 1 of each. In general, because of the nature of the mark schemes, almost all submissions are compositions rather than arrangements. As such, all the examples in this video will be compositions, and we will refer to the candidate's work as compositions for the rest of the presentation for the sake of fluency, but arrangements are acceptable anywhere a composition is mentioned. It is very important that the compositions relate to an area of study. This is abbreviated to AOS on the slide. The 2 compositions must relate to 2 different areas of study. It is possible for a composition to relate to multiple areas of study, as we will see on the next slide. Compositions can be as long as they need to be, but the combined duration of the 2 compositions should be between 2 and 4 minutes. There is no fixed penalty for falling outside these time limits, but overly long or short compositions tend to be self-penalizing, particularly under the criteria of structure and development. Links to the areas of study are important, but they can be quite loose. It is not necessary to link a composition to a set work, just the overall area of study title. Links to Area of Study 1 are generally to do with the structure. Any structure in common usage in the Baroque, Classical, or Romantic eras is fine, no matter what the actual style of the piece. It is acceptable to produce a pop song in rondo form and relate it to AOS 1. A pastiche is acceptable as a submission linked to this area of study, but is not essential. Links to Area of Study 2 will be pieces in any 20th or 21st century style. By far the most common submissions for Area of Study 2 pieces are serialist or expressionist works and minimalist compositions. However, it should be noted that the West Side Story piece is in this area of study, so it is acceptable for a song from a musical to be submitted as an Area of Study 2 piece. Area of Study 3 is the most easily understood. Compositions must be in any pop style, from ragtime and blues to the styles of the present day. A piece can be submitted as an Area of Study 4 piece if it has a link to any world music style. Note that it does not have to link to just African or Indian styles, but can relate to any culture or be a fusion of any two or more cultures. Often instrumentation is used as a link to Area of Study 4. One of the most commonly asked questions is, can my students submit 2 songs as long as they relate to different areas of study, even if they are essentially the same style? To which the answer is, yes, as long as they have a clear link to 2 different areas of study. For example, a dance track may have a repeating bass line, so it could fall under Area of Study 3 because it is in a pop style, or Area of Study 1 because it uses what is essentially a ground bass. While it is easy to make links, it is strongly advised that composition is taught from the perspective of analysing the set works. It is good practice to have a clear brief for any composition work at this level, thus knowing where the links are going to be before setting out rather than giving essentially free compositions and trying to link them to an area of study afterwards. It is possible for compositions to link to multiple areas of study. For example, a song from a musical in a pop style in rondo form, containing tabla and sitar, could link to any of the 4 areas. As a general introduction to marking compositions, it is useful to have an overview of the mark scheme. If you have not already done so, please pause the video and download the specification. The composition mark scheme is on page 48 to 52. It is split into 9 different criterion, each of which can score between 0 and 5 marks. In practice, it is most unusual for a criterion to score 0 marks, so it is essentially a range of 1 to 5. When reading through the criteria and comparing it to compositions, it is good to have a general overview as set out on the slide. If you start by assuming a criterion scores 3 and then move up or down if you are particularly impressed or dissatisfied, then you will be closer to an accurate mark than starting at 1 and working up, or starting at 5 and working down. The word functional used to describe a mark of 2 means that the composition does approximately what it is supposed to in that area, but is either very basic in how it achieves it, or it has some awkward moments, or it is just there to make up the numbers. The first 3 criteria, A, B, and C, are compulsory. All compositions must be marked using these criteria, plus 3 others from the remaining 6 options. You should choose criteria that best benefit the candidate. Although certain types of composition tend to favour the same optional criteria, it is good to remain open-minded in case one of the criteria proves to gain the candidate an extra mark. If the candidate has made many mistakes in how they have harmonized their piece, it does not make sense to choose harmony as an optional criteria. But their rhythmic work may gain them more marks. Students do not select which criteria are chosen to mark their work. This is entirely the job of the teacher-examiner. If you haven't already done so, pause the video now and download the audio files and composition scores. The first composition is linked to Area of Study 2. The teacher-examiner labelled TE on the slide, chose optional criteria D, F and G. Use the mark scheme on page 48 to 52 of the specification to judge the work. If you find that you are torn between two marks, for example, you aren't sure whether to award a 4 or a 5 for a given criterion, hedge your bets until the end. Then, if you have two criteria with split decisions, go up to the higher mark with one of them and down to the lower mark with the other. This is almost a way of awarding half marks and ensures that you avoid going too high or low with the overall mark. This is a good example of writing in this genre. It makes imaginative use of structure, texture, and melody. There is genuine development of ideas, rather than simple layering of musical lines. The orchestration is imaginative, with several different string techniques used. There are 3 clear sections, but there is continuous growth throughout. Harmony would have been an awkward criterion to choose, and the teacher-examiner has wisely steered clear of this, going for melody, texture, and rhythm instead. The melody was just about worth 5 marks because of the interplay between the parts and the rhythmic nature of the melodies, which was very much in character for the piece as a whole. This piece merits more than one listen as more and more good qualities come out on repeated listens. The second composition is linked to Area of Study 1. The teacher-examiner chose optional criteria D, E and F. Use the mark scheme on page 48 to 52 of the specification to judge the work. Make notes on your thoughts so you can compare them with the marks we awarded on the next slide. This is a generally pleasing piece with some development of the ABA structure and some development of ideas, but it does have a few weaker moments. The harmony is generally good, with attempts at a key change to B minor, if occasional awkward chords sometimes spring out. There is a clear awareness of texture and some effective accompaniment patterns. The third composition is also linked to Area of Study 1. The teacher-examiner chose optional criteria D, F, and G. Use the mark scheme on page 48 to 52 of the specification to judge the work. Make notes on your thoughts so you can compare them with the marks we awarded on the next slide. Note that the baseline was given to the candidate. The teacher-examiner mentions this on the MUS 200 form. There are 2 counter melodies that run alongside the main melody. The piece could have been a little longer to give it more chance to develop fully. The key change, although a touch sudden, works fine and gives the piece a lift. The drum parts are well written. There is a sensitive awareness of texture, with clear textural contrasts in the piece. However, it was not felt that the piece merited the full marks awarded by the teacher-examiner, with the first 4 criteria felt just to satisfy the good descriptor. The fourth composition is linked to Area of Study 3. The teacher-examiner chose optional criteria E, F, and G. Use the mark scheme on page 48 to 52 of the specification to judge the work. Make notes on your thoughts so you can compare them with the marks we awarded on the next slide. This composition has a few interesting moments where clear melodic motifs jump out. It may have been a better idea to choose melody as an option, although there are only occasional moments of lucidity in the melody. There is an occasional reggae feel, although at one point it is clear that the candidate has accidentally pushed the rhythm along an extra beat. It is rather rambling, but a clear structure can still be detected. The rhythms generally work fine. However, half of the criteria are a good example of the word functional. The fifth composition is linked to Area of Study 3. The teacher-examiner chose optional criteria D, E, and G. Use the mark scheme on page 48 to 52 of the specification to judge the work. Make notes on your thoughts so you can compare them with the marks we awarded on the next slide.
This song has a somewhat unbalanced structure, with a clear attempt at doing something a little different. As always, the Sibelius voice does not help to present the song in its best light. If possible, it is a good idea to get either the candidate or another suitable singer to sing the melody, even if it is just over the backing provided by Sibelius.
There is some suspect word setting in this composition, which is typical of work at this level. Candidates often compose the melody first and then try to set their lyrics to it afterwards, or they attempt to program the melody and do not quite manage to achieve an accurate realization of what they hear in their heads. The last composition is linked to Area of Study 4. The teacher-examiner chose optional criteria E, F, and H. However, the moderator felt it benefited the candidate more to change optional criterion H to G. Use the mark scheme on page 48 to 52 of the specification to judge the work. Make notes on your thoughts so you can compare them with the marks we awarded on the next slide. Uses a modal tonality on occasion, which helps with the Area of Study 4 feel. There is some development of ideas. The form is simple, but a little rambling. The dynamics are okay, but the rhythm is more of a clear 4 mark criterion. The attempt at the counterpoint is appropriate, but not entirely successful, even if it should be credited for ambition. Making good comments to justify the marks you have given is important. It is perfectly acceptable to use the language taken directly from the mark scheme. Sometimes it is best to write the comments first, based on what you hear and how you feel it relates to the mark scheme, and then add the numerical marks at the end. This will ensure that you are not trying to justify a higher mark than the piece deserves. Comment on any features that are important to the piece, but which are not immediately obvious on first listen or from a glance at the score. There is no harm in candidates pointing out specific techniques on their scores. For example, showing when an inverted melody or a retrograde transposition has been used.